our next guest is Dawn Keefer, who is a state representative from the 92nd Legislative District in what has been a rather interesting week before the state assembly and with the governor. And good morning, Dawn. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. I'm doing well.
Well, it's always good to have you on, and we're obviously starting the green phase today. Although, if you listen to House Resolution 836 this week, which also passed the Senate, concurrent resolutions, they say that basically the crisis is, well, it's the disaster declaration is over. So, wait, depending on who you listen to right now, we're either in the green phase or something else. Where do we stand at the moment?
So you're right. We passed a concurrent resolution. So the emergency declaration is over. It doesn't mean that there aren't still some guidelines to follow. You have CDC guidelines and OSHA guidelines, but we followed the law. And under Title 35, we said that, the emergency doesn't exist anymore. So we terminated the emergency declaration because we know Wolf was a renegade with every rule, and he was suspending every statute within his power. And the governor decided he doesn't want to follow the law because they really don't apply to him, just us. And he's told us, he's not going to follow it. He's not going to issue the proclamation that is necessary, that he's supposed to do under the law to end the emergency declaration.
Dawn, let me ask you a question, because I remembered reading this about a month and a half ago, and I think you and I may have talked about it some. But part of the very emergency declaration that he has used to govern during this time, okay, and to issue the various kinds of things, including the yellow, red, green, is the same emergency declaration that has in that after 90 days, a concurrent resolution by the House and Senate in the state of Pennsylvania would end the emergency. Am I correct on that? I don't want to put bad information out there, but I was pretty sure that was all part of the same emergency the emergency law that the government has been using as his basis for governing.
Right. So the same title where it says how he gets this authority in the first place, and he extended that 90 days, by the way. So he can, in the same title, he can extend it. So he extended it 90 days. And it also says that, the General Assembly may end the emergency declaration by a concurrent resolution, and the governor shall issue a proclamation ending it. Not may, and he can choose what he wants to do. It says he shall do it. And so he's not following the law.
It is interesting to me.
It'll be published today should be published today in the PA Bulletin. And in my opinion, we've done what's required in the law, and so the emergency declaration portion is over.
Yeah. Now the governor says, and I was reading some of the things last night. He says, well, if that's the case, then a whole lot of things we have put into place we'll lose those. And also, he said, no matter what you do in terms of the legislature. He said this. He said, ending the disaster declaration would not reopen anything. It just wouldn't end. It just wouldn't, and anyone who says differently is wrong. And then he said, not only does any concurrent resolution need to come to the governor for approval or disapproval, but the disaster declaration is separate from the orders signed by Secretary of Health Dr. Rachel Levine under the Disease Prevention Act that include provisions for business reopening and for worker and building safety. Those orders remain in place. The legislature did nothing to end those, quote unquote. Your reaction?
Okay, so some of the health orders that were put out under a different section of the law, which is the Disease and Prevention Act. And so we're sorting all of those out, like which orders were which. There are so many.
Sure.
But there's such confusion out there that any business that would be sanctioned in some fashion that would take that to court, it would never hold up in court. If the governor's going to try to levy some kind of sanction, it would never hold up in court. And so what the governor is doing essentially is trying to rule by fear. So let's continue to scare people and threaten people and try to control them that way instead of addressing some of these issues, which he does have the ability to address. For example, he mentioned telehealth. You can't do telehealth anymore after this. That's not true. You are able to do that already. It was having an agreement, an understanding. And mind you, the governor vetoed the telehealth bill. So this isn't a matter of cooperating or working together for the best interest of the Pennsylvania. This is a matter of Governor Wolf maintaining control. That's what this is about. It's shameful.
He said yesterday He said yesterday that he understands he would not even have the opportunity to veto the resolution because he claims it, as it is written, it's not going to reach my desk. He said, I don't know anywhere in the Constitution that the General Assembly can unilaterally pass a law and put it into place, which is kind of ironic because this Title 35, which I think is what's being referred to, is exactly where it says he can do certain things. And if you agree that you can do certain things in that, wouldn't you not also agree that when it comes time for the legislature to do their thing, they also ought to be able to do certain things, which includes a resolution? That's
exactly.
the ironic thing in what he said.
Exactly. That is what exactly where you've been getting your power is the same power you say that don't exist for us. And how ironic for him to say the legislature doesn't have unilateral power. You mean like the unilateral power you have been using for the last 90 days to decimate our economy and our livelihoods of our businesses and families?
And I think the problem here is, and for a lot of people listening to this, you cannot cherry pick what you like and then what you don't like. You say, well, okay, we're just, we're not going to go by that. And the governor, it reminds me a little bit of the hypocrisy that I found for the governor a week ago when he marched in that parade and in the protest. And I understood he has feelings about the protest, as we all do, and I respect that. But when you're the governor who's been telling people, hey, if you open before time, we're going to fine you, which he's done to some places in this area, round the clock being one of them. And yet when he went out and violated, he said, yeah, I shouldn't have probably done that, but I did. You're not getting fined. There's nothing that's happening to you. And yet you, as the example of the person who has been telling people how to live, are breaking that yourself. And there's a real haughtiness and what do I want to say? Kind of a haughtiness and, do as I say, don't do as I do kind of situation there that most people find, I think, very distasteful. Your thoughts?
Right. When somebody in leadership, right, they don't live by the rules that they levy, right, that's a dictator. That is not somebody that is an elected official. And that's the way he's acting. You're absolutely right. So the rules apply to you, but not to him. So he can go do his march because it was important enough. But what you're doing is not. So he gets to pick and choose which rules he'd like to follow and which ones he doesn't. But he knows better, and you don't. You're too dumb to make those decisions for yourself, and he'll continue to tell you how to do it. It's just so.
We're with Dawn Keefer, state representative from the 92nd Legislative District. Dawn, you've become kind of a voice during this COVID-19 time, people are saying you're a firebrand and all that. How do you characterize yourself and your role to play as a state representative during this time and going forward?
Well, I come from a family of small businesses, and so it's really personal to me. I get being closed and how much cash reserves these small businesses have and what the true impact and devastation is to our small businesses. So when I kept hearing people talk, like our fellow legislators talk about, hey, it's not a big deal, it's 30 days or it's 60 days or right, we can figure this out. I didn't think they really got the urgency of it. And so I really just became a voice for small businesses and listening to, all of our offices, our legislative offices are fielding thousands of calls and emails every day. And the desperation on the voices coming to us is heartbreaking. And if the governor were actually connected and he were getting a fraction of these, he would not be acting in the way that he is.
Yeah. What have we learned from the whole COVID-19 process here? What have you learned, not only as a representative, but as a person? And obviously some of the things you just mentioned are obviously learning points there. But and what are you hearing from your constituents more than not during this particular time?
So I've been hearing from our constituents, everybody's done. There are a few that are still saying, oh, it's really scary and we shouldn't do anything or, we shouldn't lift any of these measures. But I would say overwhelmingly, people are finished. They are at the point where, hey, they're going to be smart, they're going to protect themselves, and they can make those decisions on their own. And if you don't, you can stay home. Nobody's making you go out. But I can't say that the efforts taken initially were bad because we didn't know what we were facing. However, sure, as we continue to get information, we know who our most vulnerable populations are. We protect them. We don't isolate and quarantine the healthy. We've never done it before. And as the data keeps coming in, it shows it wasn't justified this time.
Well, and we're never going to be totally safe. I mean, let's, flu season is going to come again this fall, and people are going to get sick and people are going to die. And we have a vaccine for that. And so I look at that and I say, okay, now we ought not just be willy-nilly and throw pie to the sky here, but by the same token, as you mentioned, there are precautions and there are safety things in place, and people have the option of going where they want to go or not going where they want to go. But by the same token, I think, and I was thinking about this the other day, and I wanted to bounce this off you. Suppose all of a sudden someone were to say, hey, things are bad again, we're going to go back to red. Do you think people would be willing to go this time?
No. I think you would have, you would have a tea party on your hands at that point. I mean, trying just to keep the people in control from yellow to green or red to yellow. People just were, you saw York County, right? We
Right.
just moved forward. Businesses, we have over 40 businesses that were opening. One of my businesses said, oh, good, now I'm not a derelict anymore come Friday because they've been in operation. So you aren't going to go backwards in this. And it's not the government's responsibility to keep everybody safe. I mean, we take risks every single day. We know what things are. Do you remember when we were getting the daily death totals for the flu?
Yes.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither.
Yeah.
I know.
I remember that we never did get those daily death totals.
Right.
Yeah, I want to get Howard in New Park's got a question for you, Dawn. We're going to get him in here. Howard, go ahead. A question for Representative Keefer.
Yes, good morning. We see you have this coalition that passed this resolution. What would it take to impeach Governor Wolf?
All right. Thank you, Howard. Appreciate your question. Dawn, would we ever get to that point?
So we actually have a bill, and I've been telling my constituents we have to build the case on that. So Representative Darrell Metcalf has introduced an impeachment bill. I did co-sponsor that because of specific laws and rules I feel the governor has violated throughout this process. Going out and marching in the protests the other day was, was a prime example of what's going on. Right now, refusing to follow the law is prime example of impeachable acts. So I think we're building the case. In the House, it can pass by a majority, but it has to pass by 2/3 in the Senate. I don't know if we'll get that far or not. However, we did pass this resolution with bipartisan support.
Yep.
So
and the
even
governor,
in his own party, they're getting fed up.
Yeah, the governor needs to, again, recognize that the very instrument that he has used is the very instrument that you're using at the moment. And maybe the courts are going to decide it, but, the governor would have a chance also to do his part in this. I mean, we have to respect the rule of law. And when you don't respect the rule of law, and the governor was asking all of us to respect the rule of his edicts, which served as law during that time, then would it not be fair for us to ask that the legislative part of this also be respected by the governor in his role in that particular instrument, I believe Title 35, if I'm not mistaken, that is carried out as an emergency declaration. About 20 seconds left. Final thoughts on your part.
I agreed. He either is going to follow them or not. He's picking and choosing. But the fact that he has done everything he has based upon Title 35 really should make it a moot point that he's not following it, and that the judges would rule in our favor that, it's done. This is all, it's either applicable or it's not.
Okay. Dawn Keefer with us here on WSBA Morning News with Gary Sutton.